Many of us feel like our attention spans have gotten worse.
It just seems like in one ear and out the other.
And there are a lot of people willing to offer you a very simple solution to this problem: willpower. You just need to grayscale your phone, turn on Do Not Disturb, set time limits for work. The problem is that all of these solutions put the blame back on you.
It's all your fault.
Without looking at the cause of the problem in the first place. They are saying it is your fault your attention has been hijacked because you're just not disciplined enough. But the truth is, our attention spans haven't gotten worse. They have, however, been stolen by platforms, by profit, and by modern life. But if our attentions have been stolen, it means we can steal them back, right? So, your struggle to focus is likely not personal failure, but instead a very predictable outcome to living in an environment that is meticulously designed to steal your concentration. Our environment has changed drastically in like the last 100 years, even quicker more in the last 20 years. And we act as if the human brain has evolved a new brain capacity for these modern demands and thus should be able to handle them. But it hasn't. It would likely take tens of thousands of years, likely more, for our brains to catch up. But who even knows what the world will look like then? If we live in an environment that is designed to steal our focus, we can't just assume willpower alone will get us there. If you're trying to eat less sugar, you wouldn't leave your favorite dessert on the kitchen counter, right? Now, I could go on a long rant about how our attention has gotten stolen in the first place, but I am not going to do that. Just kidding. You know I'm going to do that because I love a rant and a chance to pull out the whiteboard, so come on. Okay, so, I forgot that this was here. I'm just gonna erase this. This is awkward. Right. Anyways, so most of us assume that the start of our focus being stolen starts here with the smartphone. But we are actually going to go back way further, like almost 600 years ago, to the invention of the printing press. Now, the printing press was first invented in the 1440s by Johannes Gutenberg. The invention of this device created what many call the typographic mind, and this refers to a mind that is shaped by reading. Reading requires sustained engagement with the author's argument or the thoughts, page after page, line after line. It requires memory and internal dialogue, and this tends to create a mind, the typographic mind, that is linear and patient and basically pretty good at concentration. Now, the 19th century and early 20th centuries were saturated with print, jam-packed with newspapers. Political speeches would actually be printed verbatim, and people would read them in full. Like Abraham Lincoln's debates with Stephen Douglas, for example, were printed in hours-long transcripts in the newspapers, and the expectation was assumed that people would be able to sit there and read the whole thing. Information was not optimized for immediacy, it was optimized for depth. Now, the first step towards stealing our attention came in the late 19th century as mass circulation newspapers were kind of on the rise. There was suddenly competition for readers' attention, which brought a style of news reporting that was called yellow journalism. This reporting favored sensationalism and scandal over objective facts because it would boost the paper's circulation. While the newspapers were still print, the seeds of the attention economy was planted. And we started to learn that grabbing people's attention started to matter just as much as the actual content itself. The next change, of course, was radio, which replaced reading with listening, which is much more passive, and I'm sure you can guess the next thing that's going to come, of course, television. In Neil Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, which actually came out in 1984 but is still weirdly relevant today, he talks about how TV shifted the public's discourse from something that was more rational and literacy-based to something that was entertainment and image-based, and that what we consumed started to become more about just entertainment itself. The 24-hour news cycle required constant novelty, and viewers were no longer expected to think on a topic for hours. They were just expected to be engaged, and most importantly, remain engaged as long as possible. Then, of course, the internet walks into the bar, and it goes from an episode of Cheers to a scene from Animal House. The internet accelerated everything. While you could still read online, it's nothing like reading in a book. When you're online, every platform's goal is your attention. They want to keep you there as long as possible because your eyes and your time are their profit. I mean, the longer you watch this video, the more money that both YouTube and I make. And that's why these platforms are designed to ensure that you never get bored. The minute you get bored of what I'm saying, saying right now, you can just click one of the videos that are over here or like over there or wherever they are. When you read the news, there are tons of clickbait titles all around you. The environment itself discourages long sustained concentration because the minute you're bored, they're going to offer you something else. And just when you thought this night couldn't get any wilder, smartphones walk into the bar and suddenly it's gone from Animal House to The Hangover real fast. Now the internet is with us all the time, and the distraction it brought is no longer occasional, but constant. Notifications insert themselves into daily life, social media platforms perfect their algorithms to maximize engagement, infinite scroll removes any natural stopping points, and short form video compresses big ideas into seconds, right? A book becomes a thread, a lecture becomes a highlight reel, a complex argument becomes distilled down into a single viral quote. And just like with yellow journalism, it's less about the content and more about the exaggeration and sensationalism. So there was this viral claim that went around the internet not that long ago that said our attention span has dropped to 8 seconds, which it claimed was less than that of a goldfish, who apparently boasts a 9-second attention span. Both of these facts were false. The claim went viral after being shared in a 2015 Microsoft study, but investigative reporters did some digging. They found that they got the data from a source called Statistic Brain, which has now been debunked as false. The goldfish part isn't even true. It turns out there's actually quite a bit of scientific research indicating that goldfish actually have pretty good memory and they can retain information for months. Who knew? It's not that our actual attention spans have gotten worse. It's just that consuming condensed versions of things has lowered our tolerance for depth itself. It makes us less likely to think critically, to learn deeply, or to question anything at all. I mean, going back to the goldfish myth, it really is the perfect example of the problem it's claiming to prove. This very complex reality about our attention we just talked about was summarized into a misleading but very catchy sound bit. Because, well, it was more engaging. Well, it didn't turn out that our attention spans are only 8 seconds. It did prove how easily attention economics can distort the truth when wow factor matters more to us than accuracy. That 8-second attention fact was picked up everywhere, even Time magazine. It shows how because of our hijacked attention spans, there's less chance to us even fact-checking the things that we hear. Now, each of these shifts from print to radio to TV to internet to smartphones has moved us from a world that demanded patience to one that doesn't really require any.
Has it been an hour yet?
I think it's been like 10 minutes if we round up from 1 minute.
And while that shift hasn't resulted in a biological decline in our attention spans, at least not yet, dun dun dun, they have transformed the environment in which our attention spans now live, which means if you want to steal back your attention, you need to change your environment.
Well, this is great. I'm heading home so as not to have to be here anymore.
So I'm going to share with you a very simple 5-step method that I have been doing that I have decided to call the S.T.E.A.L method. You get it? Like steal back your attention. It's cute, I know. I started this about a year ago and I've been slowly integrating it into my life over like 9 months, and I can tell you it has drastically changed my life. The last year has been probably hands down one of the most transformative years of my life, next only to maybe the year I became a mother, because that'll change you in ways that you can't imagine. And all of that comes down to the S.T.E.A.L method, so let me share with you. So S stands for shut down the source. We need to first cut off the source that's stealing our attention. Mainly this is our smartphones. For most people, if you ask them to give up their smartphone, they might respond, "You can pry it from my cold dead hands." And I want you to know that I'm not necessarily going to be saying that you need to do that in this video, but I also want to say that I had also convinced myself of this for years, that I needed one. But it turns out you don't. I've actually had a minimal phone for about 6 months. For those of you who don't know, a minimal phone is a phone with no apps or internet. My husband has had one for 2 years, and I'm here to assure you that you can live in 2026 without smartphones. There are workarounds to all of it, which can be a topic for another video, but I just wanted to mention it here. But I have really grappled with this, and I can say that you do need to at least drastically change it if you truly want your brain and your focus back. In the book, Stolen Focus, Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again by Johann Hari, he talks about the idea of reclaiming our attention, and he says you have to separate yourself for increasing periods of time from the sources of your distraction. And in the book, he quotes a neuroscientist named Earl Miller who says it's impossible to try to do this simply on willpower alone. He says it's too hard to resist that informational tap on the shoulder. You cannot just will yourself into avoiding the distractions on your phone. You need to remove them, or at least find ways to remove them for very long chunks of your day. So to me, I think this means all the social media gone from your phone. I think it's got to go. I hate saying this so conclusively because I'm a people pleaser and I do not like to rock the boat. I think doing the suggestions of time limits or grayscale really don't work. The time limits hardly create that much friction when you can just click away the notification. And grayscale, well, making it less stimulating doesn't actually remove the problem. I'm not saying you need to get rid of social media altogether. If you can still check it on your computer, I think checking it on your computer is better because social media's only real purpose is to be an attention stealer. That's basically all that it does. But at least a computer is not as portable. You can't grab it instantly and immediately. You can't check it while you're waiting in line or sitting in your car. Once I deleted social media, I started looking at what other apps were also distracting on my phone. The next thing to go for me was shopping apps and entertainment apps, and then finally I got rid of my internet browser and finally my email. We have become very dependent and tied to these things, but I can assure you, you can live without constant access to them. And you can dip your toe into this one however you want. Maybe it's just deleting one or two of those apps that are constantly stealing your attention. Next up is T, which stands for trade the stimulations. Our phones steal our attention mainly through stimulation. They have put many of us in sort of like a dopamine habit loop. This is what happens when we start using constant stimulation as sort of like a form of relief. You're bored, so you watch some videos on TikToks, or you're not ready to start your tasks, so you check your email to warm up. You're feeling overwhelmed, so you scroll for a few minutes to take the edge off. Our brain has created this habit loop. And if you know the basic principles of a habit loop, it says that there is a cue, a routine, and a reward. The cue is you're bored or some sort of similar emotion. The routine is scroll for a little bit. And the reward is some low friction dopamine. Our brains have gotten used to that relief. And so we almost need to replace it with something almost as easy as the access to our phones and just as simple. This will probably take you some time to figure out what the trades in your life can be. I find it needs to fit a few criteria. One, it needs to be with your hands. The phones keep our hands busy, and so we need to find something else that will also keep our hands busy. Our hands are directly connected to our brains. There's actually this really interesting theory called the extended mind framework, and it says that human cognition isn't confined just to our brains. External tools that are used for cognitive functions can become integral components of our cognitive processes. This means when we rely on our phones, they can become sort of an external tool of our brain, and our brain relies on it. So you need to work on breaking that association. The next thing you want your replacement to be is something quick and easily accessible. This is kind of the secret sauce of smartphones, right? And how they have embedded themselves so deeply into our extended mind framework. If your trade-off requires time to pull out or set up, it's not a good enough swap. It needs to be fairly passive, so nothing that requires really super deep thinking. Think of something like a smartphone. You're trying to replace the smartphone. So it needs to be something with our hands, easily accessible, and fairly passive. So this could be knitting or doodling, a simple exercise, low supply crafting. It can be reading or journaling. And then you want to set up your environment to have these stimulation swaps available almost as easily as your phone. I like to keep interesting things to read around my house. We get a newspaper 2 times a week, so I can browse through those articles. I always keep a book near my kitchen. I keep pens and paper in multiple places throughout my house, so I can always just doodle if I want. I've taken up bread baking, not necessarily because it's cool online, but because it's a very passive thing that I can do with my hands when I'm just going about my day in my house raising my kids. I like to do crossword puzzles. You can sit and do these for a sustained period of time, or you can do them if you just have 2 minutes to kill. So they fit the bill really well. When you have the urge to distract yourself, you want to trade the stimulation and opt for one of these options instead. And this brings me into E, which stands for engage deeply. As we discussed when we took the journey from the printing press to the smartphone, our opportunities to engage deeply have been drastically reduced, which means we need to actively seek them out instead. I've mentioned this quote in other videos. It's by Patricia Greenfield. She's a cultural psychologist. She has a quote where she says, "Every medium has its strengths and its weaknesses. Every medium develops some cognitive skills at the expense of others. The internet may develop impressive visual intelligence. The cost seems to be deep processing, mindful knowledge acquisition, inductive analysis, critical thinking, imagination, and reflection. We need to find ways to think and engage deeply to allow for this deeper processing. So we need to be busy with our hands for the sake of being busy with our hands. Like I said, our hands are connected to our brains, so make them better extensions than the smartphones. So make art, make bad art, right? Make art just as a process and not because you're going to show it off. Make shitty art. Journal, not to be poetic or thought-provoking or to create something that will be shared with the world, but just write down your thoughts with your hands and a pen. Cook things. Cook good things, cook bad things, just cook them. And most importantly, read. And don't just read to read, read to think, to wonder, to have a dialogue with the author. Annotate while you read. Reread the same thing. Journal about what you read. Force yourself to engage deeply with the written word again. I think for me, this has been one of the more notable changes since ditching my smartphone. I've started reading more deeply. I used to read and I always enjoyed it, but I always felt like there was this constant buzzing that I needed to read more and more. It was sort of like I had this feeling that I needed to have quantity over quality when it came to my reading. And I now know that this came from being in an online environment, and so much of the online environment, if we have established, is about more. And it makes me think of a quote that I heard Ryan Holiday say once about this, and I'm totally paraphrasing it, but he basically said, you would never brag to somebody about how fast you are at sex or how quick you can eat a 5-star meal. But then with reading, this sort of this weird motivation to read more and like read it so fast. Our culture is at its core all about optimizing everything to death, making everything faster and easier. But the trade-off is it strips away the friction that gives things depth and meaning. And so we need to add that back to our life, usually by adding some friction, which brings me into my next letter really beautifully, which is A, and it stands for act with effort. So as we've discussed, most of the systems we live inside today are designed to remove friction or discomfort and make things as easy or quick as possible. Our society really is all about easier and faster. I think about a quote that I read in Paul Kingsnorth's book, and in his book, he has a moment, he's standing in this sort of tourist town, and he says, I realized that everything around me was dedicated solely to the immediate gratification of the senses. But it turns out our bodies like hard work, and they don't just like it, they need it. Convenience culture has taken away all of that from us for the sake of making our lives easier, but it's not really doing us any favors. I think by allowing ourselves to tolerate small inconveniences like having to wait for a library book or cooking instead of just ordering takeout or batching errands so that you don't have to shop online. It's not a form of deprivation. I think it has a lot of downstream benefits. First, it takes the pressure off feeling like you need to optimize every moment. Speed and ease have become our default, but when we allow ourselves to endure minor inconveniences, it usually allows us to also let go of that feeling of needing to constantly optimize. And then there's the skill piece. When we routinely outsource simple tasks, we weaken our own self-reliance. We start paying for things that we are perfectly capable of doing. Doing that time and time again chips away at both our competence and our satisfaction. Now, I get that this is kind of abstract, so let me give you concrete examples. My husband and I tried out a social experiment on ourselves to get rid of all streaming devices just to see how we could do it, right? So this meant no smart TV, no streaming of shows or movies, no music streaming. And so we had to swap to using CDs and DVDs. Now we go to our local library and check out DVDs. Now this certainly is acting with more effort. It would be a lot easier to just scroll the options that are on our TV and pick something out, never have to leave our house. But forcing ourselves to use DVDs now means we spend our Friday afternoon taking a family trip to the library where we check out movies that we're going to watch that weekend. We interact with people, we know our local librarians, sometimes we run into somebody that we know there. It is a much more satisfactory experience. And I get that this example goes beyond the scope of what some people might do, but it's just an example of how sometimes choosing a little friction gives you a more satisfactory result. Another example could be driving without GPS. It might be reading a book instead of relying on the few sound bits or quotes of it. Writing someone an actual thank you letter instead of sending a thank you text. Meeting up with a friend to have a conversation in person instead of catching up on text. Choosing to cook something from scratch instead of ordering it. Attempting the DIY instead of paying for somebody to do it for you. Seeking out a local specialty store to buy something you need instead of searching for it and ordering it online. There are endless ways that you can add a little bit of friction to your tasks that actually gives you more joy and gratification and satisfaction. All of these examples are a little bit harder, but I can assure you that a face-to-face conversation with your friend would be way more enjoyable than a text. Attempting to cook something from scratch gives you a higher sense of agency and a higher feeling of satisfaction. You derive a lot more from a full book than you do from just the sound bites. And because there's always somebody in the comments that gets mad when I say stuff like this is not an all or nothing. I'm not saying you need to be doing all of these things. These are all just little tiny examples of some tiny little swaps that you could make. Now my final letter is L, which stands for Liberate Your Environment. Going back to the very beginning of this video, I mentioned we are living in an environment that is meticulously designed to steal your concentration. So if the environment is the problem, instead of assuming we can just willpower our way out of it, we need to instead consider changing our environment. I've already made my meager case to decrease your use in smartphones, and I don't want to rock the boat too much as I said, but I do think we need to actively liberate them from our environment. So I'm not saying you need to get rid of your smartphone, but make your phone less distracting. And I don't think this means simply putting on do not disturb or adding time limits. Delete the apps, you know the ones that I mean. And once your phone is liberated from distractions, I think it's still worth removing it from your actual environment for large chunks of time. Have 24 hours a week where you are phone free. Leave the laptop in your office for the entire weekend. Keep your phone in your purse from when you get home until your kids go to bed. Remember, if you want to get back your focus, you really have to remove the distractions. Okay, so a quick review. S.T.E.A.L. S, shut down the source. T, trade the stimulations. E, engage deeply. A, act with effort. And L, liberate the environment. I hope you take this video as an acceptance that it's not just you. You are not worse at focusing. It's not just you struggling to stay on task. Our environment is set up in every way to pull our focus, and people telling you just to engage stronger willpower, I think, are cheating you. That being said, I think there are some changes we can make to our environment to sort of steal it back. But that does it for today's video. As always, I really appreciate you stopping by and watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember to be kind to yourself and to others, and I will see you all in my next video.